Hello and welcome to the investment season of How to Start Up, a podcast for anyone starting or scaling a company. Hosted by me, Juliet Fallowfield, founder of the B Corp certified PR communications and podcast consultancy, Fallowfield & Mason, where we teach you how to own your PR in-house. Having decided to raise investment for your business, it's important to prepare your financials so that prospective investors can assess the inner workings of your company. Given everyone can find business finance complex to get their heads around, I wanted to talk to someone who didn't come from a financial background, but has totally smashed it in raising investment efficiently for their business. In this episode, I hear from Daisy Knatchbull, founder of The Deck, the first women's-only tailoring house to have a shop front in Savile Row's 200-year history. Beloved by the fashion press since its launch in 2019, The Deck represents Daisy's mission to change tailored clothes for women and offer them a compelling alternative to fast fashion. Daisy kindly shares her advice on how to approach finances when you don't have a background in it, who to bring in to support you, and what to be aware of when going into pitch, all before having those extensive investor conversations. Thank you so much for your time. I know how precious it is. No, it's great because I've long admired what you've been doing, and I can't believe that you started in 2019 because I feel like The Deck's been around for a really long time.
I can't believe it's only been that long. It's been, but in a great way. It just feels, we now have the largest shop front on Savile Row. I just never, ever thought I'd be in this place. Yeah.
Total, irrespective of gender.
Irrespective of gender, yeah.
Go Daisy. That's amazing because I know that The Deck, and you'll tell us more about it, but you are the only female founded tailor on Savile Row in its 200-year history.
First shop front for women. Yeah.
Amazing. And congratulations.
Thank you.
And you're probably going, well, yeah, obviously, because that's what we need to be doing and that's what needs to happen. But it probably was not that easy. Because looking from the outside in, you've built this incredible brand very quickly, given the pandemic and Brexit. But can you just give us a bit of introduction as to why you started The Deck and how you started it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always say it's crazy, isn't it, that we put men on the moon however many years ago, but there was no shop front for women on Savile Row. So it always seemed like something that just should kind of have been there, but hasn't been. My background before this was I was always interested in fashion from a very young age. And before I was doing what I was doing, I'd worked in various roles within fashion, styling, PR, and I wanted to move into menswear. I felt that women's wear was too saturated. I was always looking for a gap in the market, and I just felt that women's wear was a place to kind of be. So I took a job on Savile Row, and a place that I'd never been on in my life and knew nothing about. And I thought I'd understand menswear kind of from the stitch up. And the first job that I had there was actually PR coordinator. And I ended up working there for 5.5 years, working my way up to becoming comms director. And that was for a tailor called Huntsman, a very famous men's tailor on Savile Row, who also did women. I mean, a lot of the tailors did women's. It was just a very tiny portion of their business. And as you can imagine, all of these tailors were geared towards men. They were very dark, very kind of heavy interiors and felt very geared towards men. And it was not very often that you'd see a woman walking down the street. I mean, only until recently were there really opportunities for women as tailors. So it was a really interesting place to be. I was 24 years old and I was literally immersing myself in this secret, wonderful world of tailoring. Yeah. And it truly is this kind of magical place. It's like a little village and it holds some of the most talented people in the world on that street. I mean, truly, with skills and the art, the craftsmanship that's been passed down for generations. And in 2016, I was trying to bring more women and attract more women to Huntsman. And for those that don't know, Huntsman was the tailor in Kingsman. So we were doing a lot of filming for Kingsman, the movie around there, and they changed the whole interiors. It was all quite fun. And Savile Row was this great place. It was busy and buzzing. And this is pre-pandemic, pre-Brexit and all these things.
The world falling
apart. And so in 2016, I thought we would do a PR stunt to try and attract more women to Savile Row and to Huntsman. And so I became the first woman to wear a top hat and tails.
That was 2016 at Ascot.
Exactly. And that was terrifying. And I think, a strange thing to do. I got a lot of comments from kind of more of the old school men as I was walking in, but actually the manager let me into the rolling closure and I got clapped in, which was amazing. We got loads of amazing press and just talking to all the women, I just suddenly thought, gosh, there just isn't a space solely for women on Savile Row.
This
More
was when you were
people-
at Huntsman and you were like, I'm going to do this to prove a point that women can wear beautiful tailoring.
Exactly. And that they can come to Savile Row and have things made. And I wore this beautiful tails and top hat. And then they actually subsequently changed the dress code quickly after that to allow women to wear trousers. But it was this real moment for me of, my goodness, a lot of women out there who, by the way, the reason that before Savile Row wasn't that interested in doing tailoring for women is our bodies are more difficult. You know, we've got boobs and we've got bums, but we're the ones that need clothes made. We go through IVF, pregnancies, mastectomies, menopause, all these things as a woman that just mean our bodies change shape continuously over years, but also over months, as we know. And it just seemed crazy to me that there wasn't somewhere that was catering solely to those women. We have clients now who've never been able to wear trousers until they found us. It's just feels like such a crying shame that this wasn't offered. And of course, it comes at a certain price, and I understand that. But in our own small way, to make a stamp for women on Savile Row was really important. So I thought, well, I'm going to try and do it. So I left my job and I raised some money, and I thought, well, let's give this a shot and see where it goes. And actually, very quickly, it became something. We had a lot of celebrities wearing it. We were super busy with clients. And then the dreaded pandemic and Brexit hit, which is two of the worst things to ever happen to retail.
Into your brand.
9 months in. So we launched a little basement on the King's Road. And then after 6 months, with the kind of early success we'd had, managed to squirrel a bit of money away to then take a very small shop on Lower Sloane Street. And that's where I was when the pandemic kind of hit. And it was in total a year and 3 months of being shut down. And unlike other businesses, I had no ready to wear. I had no online presence. I had to see everyone face to face. So it was business closed.
And people also not wearing suits. They're all in active wear at home.
Exactly. Comfy, stretchy clothes.
Yeah. So going back, you said you left your job and you raised some money. Yeah. What in that very big decision-making process happened? You came from the Sunday Times styling, you went into fashion PR roles and very quickly progressed the ranks to become comms director of an established brand. How did you feel confident enough to then go, right, I'm going to found a business and raise some money? Because I think for me, it was off the back of redundancy and I felt like I didn't have a choice and I just made it up as I went along. But you proactively, which I think is far braver.
Extraordinary, because it's looking back now, I think that there's a lot of things at play. I think it's terrifying leaving a salaried job that's comfortable and pays the bills and stepping into the unknown. And, we've had on countless occasions from various different founders, there is that fear and that step you need to take and a level of belief in what you do. And I think before I quit my job, I went honestly for 100 coffees in 3 months with different people who had failed businesses, people who had successful businesses kind of like mine, businesses that were nothing like mine, people that inspired me, and just soaked up as much as I could. And I think that the most resounding thing that came out of that is you have to believe in what you do. And I think a lot of people want to start a business but don't necessarily have that belief. And I think that belief in what you do is so important because it's the driving force that brings you back every time in the dark, low moments where you're scared or terrified or you've got cash flow issues. That's what's going to bring you out of that and keep you moving forward and keep you putting a step ahead, one foot in front of the other. So there is a level of confidence one has to have, but I wouldn't say I was necessarily confident. I was terrified, but I believe in this. God knows how it's going to do. But if I believe in it, I think other people will. Yeah. And then you have to identify the need. Okay, I do believe there's a need. And that's really important. And for me, there's no one doing really what we're doing. And there's a scary element to that as well. Why are people not doing what you're doing? If I were doing another shoe brand, I could probably know that type of shoe would be successful based on previous businesses. But even in building my pitch deck, I couldn't really show historical data of other businesses that had done this because they hadn't. And that's also a scary thing because you've got to ask yourself why. And so for me, the idea of raising money was a question I went back and forth about. And you hear this scare stories, don't raise money, don't give away any of your business. You sell your soul to the devil, you'll be under the thumb of other people. They'll force you to do things you don't want to do. And then there's the other side. Raising money is incredibly difficult. And if you can do it, it's a wonderful thing. It allows you to take up opportunities you wouldn't otherwise do. It gives you that head start in making way. Yes, you give away equity, but isn't it better to own more equity of a very successful business than less of not? And so I was constantly flip-flopping between these. And eventually I thought, well, look, I'm the first person doing something of this kind. There are other women making for women. I'm definitely not the first person to do this, but the vision I had to become this shop for women on Savile Row, there weren't many people doing anything similar. So I thought, right, well, what I need to do is raise some capital. I've got overheads. I need a shop. I need employees, and I want to get ahead.
And if you're going to do it properly.
Yeah. And I want to do this, and I want to go, and I want to own that space, and I want to be the market leader in that space. So I raised 150,000 SEIS, this amazing scheme. I'm sure your listeners know, but for those that don't, EIS is a wonderful tax relief scheme that the government offers to help people invest in seed enterprises, and it has amazing kind of tax relief. And so I put the word out, and of those 100 coffees, I asked them all to introduce me to one other person and one other person. And I went on this big chase to see if I could raise this money, and lots of no's and some yeses and some maybes. And that for me was the most terrifying part. I didn't do maths at A level. It wasn't my strong suit. I never studied economics. I couldn't read a P&L until the point where I needed to raise money. And so I took up kind of night school with this wonderful man that I'd met on a platform called Upwork.
Oh, yeah.
You can hire freelancers. And he was based in Pakistan. I never met him, but he believed in what I did. And every night we would spend an hour on Zoom, and he'd teach me about P&Ls and DCF graphs and balance sheets and forecasting, so that I felt kind of bulletproof when it came to the investors. And obviously I have wonderful mentors around me, and I think that's hugely important, and bounced the pitch deck off them, and then finally felt ready. And actually it was my father that gave me one piece of advice that I always stick with, even now as I've subsequently raised more money, which is you are always the expert in what you do. So even if you're walking into an office of someone who is a hedge fund manager or has had multiple successful businesses, and maybe a 60-year-old man with huge experience in finance, they will never understand your business like you do. You will always be the expert, and don't be afraid to come back on things you don't know the answer to.
Yeah.
And that advice has stayed with me through every single round. If I don't know the answer to the question, I say, that's a great question. I'd love to come back to you. And where I speak about my business, I don't fear it anymore, because I know that I'm the expert in it.
Well, I love this twofold, in the sense that you're resolute in your value. And someone told me that very early on. It's like, stop deliberating pricing, own it, and just don't waste time on it. You haven't got time to waste. But in my day job, we teach founders how to do their own PR and articulate their business, because they know their story better than anyone else. No one else will be able to know those nuances around your business. You've seen it through blood, sweat and tears. You know it better than anyone. And I think with investors, you're right. They might be an expert in their field, but you're sort of bridging that gap, and you are the business. So you went and you raised the money before you started the business?
Yeah, before I started the business. And that money was going to help me with a little shop, which I took in the basin of the King's Road, investing in some inventory, but not for the ready-to-wear kind. I needed what was called fit garment to help with the fitting process, and my first employee and a production manager. My first tailor and a production manager. And that was it. And that's the only reason I survived the pandemic, because we were such a lean business then.
Yeah. There's no wastage.
No, it would be totally different.
A lot of people, it's like, you need to have minimal viable product, get someone to pay for your service, just prove that someone is willing to pay for it, and then you've got it. It doesn't matter what they pay you, but there needs to be sort of a peanut swapping exercise. But you'd gone in cold, as it were, saying, this is the idea, this is what I'm envisaging, this is the gap in the market. Would you say, I mean, it's hard for you to answer this because you've only done it your way, but would you say that's a harder pitch to raise investment for?
Yeah, for sure. And I was going to, the unfortunate reality is there are more male investors than women. Now, as I enter my third round of funding, I realized this has changed a lot, which is a beautiful thing.
But only in the last couple of years though, right?
Yeah, back in 2018. So that's nearly 6 years ago. It was a very different landscape. And
2.5% of VC funding would go to female founders. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, these statistics are crazy. I could read off a whole other load that just upset me enormously. But the funny thing is when I was pitching to all these men, they said, so you're doing men's suits for women? And I was like, no, I'm doing women's suits for women, and this idea, I think people didn't really understand what I was trying to do in the way that they can now so easily see And so certainly that was harder. But there's also something to be said here, was that I was 25 and I was much less fearless. I had cojones, as they say. It was, I felt that I had at that point no mortgage. I still have no kids. I had
nothing to lose.
Somewhat a lot to lose in many ways. I was taking jobs on the side. I squirreled money away from my previous role. I was then taking side jobs to keep funding to live before I launched this business. But it was terrifying. But I just thought, I'm going to do it. And if I believe in it, people will believe in it. And I know that there's someone that will. And then I managed to close the round actually at a £1 million valuation, which is quite punchy for a business that I hadn't launched.
Yes, that's incredible. But how long did that take you from you quitting your job and closing that round? What was the time?
So I did a lot of the business planning and stuff in the evenings whilst I retained my job, and a lot of the market research, and a lot of on the weekends I'd go and see all these people for coffees. And then it was about 6 months of quitting my job and building the pitch deck and understanding the business more and looking at the business models. And then it took me about 6 months to raise the money. And I closed the round literally months before I then launched the business.
And you had a plan in place of what you were going to do first and next, and then after that, and then the pandemic hit.
Yeah, that wasn't written into the plan.
No, I don't think it was written into anyone's plan. And I think there's a lot of good and learnings that have come out of it, but there's a lot of strife and stress that has also been experienced throughout it. Did you have investors suddenly coming back to you going, well, now what? We've invested, what's going, like, how did you manage the communications with those stakeholders?
Well, I think another valuable piece of advice I was given was, and this is scary, is you can be a little choosy with who invests. You don't always have that luxury. And particularly now is a very difficult time to raise money with the economy and everything going on. It's a luxury to have people on board who believe in your vision and let you do what you do because they back you as the founder and they believe in your vision for this business. And I'm very lucky to have investors that follow that and believe that. So when the pandemic hit, no one knew what was going on. I mean, it wasn't like I could turn to someone and say, oh, what did you do in the last global pandemic? Or what did you do when Britain left the EU? No one had the answers.
Yeah.
When Brexit first happened, no one knew what was going on. The shipping companies didn't understand. They were holding all my suits of my clients for 6 months at a time. It was a disaster, and I couldn't explain it to clients. I couldn't explain it to investors because the people couldn't explain it themselves that were a part of this. So it was a very unknown time. And I think my investors kind of understood that my goodness, tomorrow everything could be gone. The high street as we know it, brands as we know it, you couldn't even buy loo roll at that time. So I think it was all unknowns for everyone. And it was a really scary time. Yeah, for everyone. And you saw some amazing businesses that I had loved and looked up to for so long close their doors. It was a really sad time for everyone. I mean, not only because of the great death and sadness around it, but from a business perspective, it saw some of the great brands close their doors. And I just thought, how am I going to do this? And then everyone's wearing stretchy clothes and the world's changing. And I'm just thinking, this is a disaster. What on earth am I going to do? But you have to just stay resilient and strong. And really, there was nothing else you could do. You just had to sit and wait and think, right, we're closed for I don't know how long. And so I used that time of closure to do a lot of blue sky thinking. I kind of used it almost as an opportunity, right? I traded for 9 months. I'd learned a lot since before I launched. I proved my concept, but also things that I thought about my business maybe weren't what I thought, and they went in a better direction or a different direction. And so it allowed me to kind of pivot. I mean, as per this book, The Lean Startup, kind of the classic book every founder reads, but it allowed me to look obliquely at the business and do some kind of blue sky thinking and think, okay, my current business model doesn't work in this scenario. How am I going to reach my client if this happens again? And so that led me on this path to start working on the technology side of the business. It's very exciting and lots more to be discussed around that when it launches at either end of this year, beginning of next year. Or how can I refine the customer experience? I could then take the time to look at my margins and look at all the things that when you're starting a business just come at you all at once. I had the time.
The luxury of time.
It was almost, and because I was small enough, I could stop all operations. I had no costs during the pandemic. other than the cost of my employee. But we'd made some money at that time. My costs were almost nothing. And it was a time that I could reflect and say, right, I did it for 9 months in the real world. Now I've got a year to think about how that went, and then come out stronger and bigger and better. And actually that's what led me to get thinking of, right, I'd had the basement in the King's Road. I was on the shop front on Lower Stone Street. I want to get to Savile Row, and now is the time. And as much as there were a lot of bad things out of this pandemic, what it meant was retail landscape was changing. Were people going to go back to bricks and mortar? Did anyone want to own bricks and mortar at that point? It was hugely expensive. And so an opportunity arose for me to get onto Savile Row after 9 months of trading. And open up the first shop front for women on Savile Row. That never would have happened had the pandemic not happened. Not only that, but the press that came out of it, because people thought I was balmy, literally. Who is this girl taking 2,000 square foot on Savile Row in the middle of a pandemic for suiting? And so we had the BBC, we had CNBC, CNN, everyone came to, as soon as we opened out of the pandemic and retail life began. I mean, not as normal because we lived with COVID, but we were able to open. It ended up working out in our favor. And actually coming out of the pandemic, we did best revenues we'd ever done. And it was people who thought, well, I loved wearing stretchy clothes, but I kind of want to dress up now. But I want to dress up in a different way. And we've had time to think about the planet, and we've watched the planet,
buy less, buy better.
Yeah. And the pandemic, we watched the canals in Venice change, and the trees, and even on our daily walks, how just felt with less traffic and less people, the world got to breathe for a moment. And I think people realized the effect, particularly fast fashion. 11 million garments a week go to landfill in the UK. And I think people's shopping habits shifted, and it bred this more conscious consumer. So instead of spending thousands on a dress that they'll wear once, they wanted to shift that into spending money with us in things that they can wear on repeat, a multitude of different ways, as separates or together, and have inlays
amazing as well.
And that you can change shape, and it's okay because we put inlays in and we can alter them and change them, and you can pass them down to the next generation. So I think it was a combination of all of that led to this kind of post-lockdown surge in sales, and we've been doubling our business ever since.
Well, congratulations first and foremost. Given this episode and the season's focusing around investment, one thing I wanted to ask you is, your background was in fashion and PR, and then you come to be a company director, and you're like, oh, I have to learn all this business stuff that I had no idea about. And it's, as you said, you had evening classes, but did you seek other financial advice? Like, who helped you get to grips with the nuts and bolts of the finances of the business?
Yeah, there was a wonderful guy I got introduced to who was my rock at the very beginning, who came and advised me on the various things. So as much as I was learning the nuts and bolts, there was someone that I needed to talk about strategy and valuations and how much money I'd need to raise. And
was that an advisory CFO? Would that be the type?
Yeah. And he was just brilliant, and he really helped me understand. And then also the mentors, like I said, around me, bouncing ideas off and helping me get to grips to really understand the financials and what that meant for the business and what things cost. I didn't know about rates. And I mean, I knew about them, but I didn't know what that cost or what that looked like. I didn't know about so many different things, and company taxes and income tax and corporation tax, and it's just so much stuff that if I had the time, I would campaign more for schools in the UK to teach much more financial understanding, and particularly for women.
In terms of getting your finances ready for investors, are there any sort of basic things that you'd given you found to say, this is something you don't know that you don't know yet? What are the things that investors are going to really point to and want to see?
So it's a funny thing, a pitch deck, because often the person you're putting it in front of has seen a ton of them, right? They know the drill. So you should always give a 3 or really a 5-year projection of your business. But these are kind of finger in the air stuff, right?
Especially if you've not launched.
Yeah, when you're first starting out. Now, 4.5 years in, that's slightly different for me. But when you're first starting, you don't even know if it's going to work. So you can model things out till the cows come home, and having a very strong model is really important. And there are things that you can do to work out the mathematics behind, okay, roughly where you would be in 3 years' time. But there's an extraordinary phenomenon which I was often told by lots of people, which is that investors tend to slash those numbers. They think, okay. And same with valuations. It's all finger in the air stuff. So I think the statistics show men tend to be more bolshy in their financials and their pitching in a way that women aren't. And that there's a lot of stuff around women raising money versus men raising money and the kind of psychology behind it. But I think having a robust 3-year plan, best of your ability, is hugely important, because you can do a beautiful pitch deck and make it really pretty and add everything you need. But really, that's the page that they're going to be most interested in immediately. A lot of investors skip straight to understanding, okay, how much do you need? How are you using that? And what does that look like from a 3 to 5 year perspective? But also at the very beginning, identifying why you're different is hugely important. Everyone always talks about this elevator pitch.
I think you have to say it in one breath. You have to be able to articulate what problem you're solving.
Why are you different? What's the problem you're solving? And I think there's often the case where, as a founder, so much about your business that you almost forget to explain the really small details. And you don't assume people understand it as much as you do, but sometimes what I've worked out is there's more explaining than I initially imagined that I'd need to do, or really why my business is different, but it needs to be very clear and succinct. And so talking in layman's terms, and what I do is all the kind of acronyms of my industry, always write in full, always assume that someone is completely blind to what you do. And I think that's really important. I'm someone who tends to overdo text. I find it very hard, well now less so, but at the beginning, neat, succinct copy. So, and I think a punchy pitch deck that catches an eye, it doesn't have too much text on, but says everything in as little words as possible. So that's kind of my advice on the pitch deck and the financials.
Yeah, fantastic. And then given you're now onto your third raise, how does that landscape change if you've already had investment before? Have you had to do things differently? I mean, the only analogy I can think of is we just got B Corp certified, and it was one thing to do it once, but I know in 3 years' time it's going to be a whole lot harder. Yeah. Is that the same when you go for a second round of investment?
Definitely. I mean, so my second round I did just after the pandemic. Again, a brilliant time to raise money.
Well, if you can do it then, you can do it anytime.
And I raised 500,000 then. And that was very different, because suddenly that felt like a bit more of a grown-up figure. But it was still, I felt that I could do it. So then you learn about things like preemption rights and all these things where you offer your existing shareholders the chance to take up more investment. And you're pitching again to different faces, different people, except this time you've got real data and figures. So it could be a blessing, because that helps, and you can show, okay, we've proved the concept, we've got X amount of engaged clients, we've got X repeat order rate, all of these great statistics that you can show. And for you, that's
night and day, because presumably pre-launch and then post-launch and pre-revenue and post-revenue, it's a whole, there's and now here's some actuals.
Yeah, so that was a huge relief. But with that comes, firstly, you're held to a figure. So from the first round, it's you want me to invest in the second round? Well, this is where you thought you'd be. And thankfully, we were exactly where we thought we'd be. But then once again, okay, now you've got the figures and now you're projecting again. And I'd say don't get too worked up on getting exactly where you want to be. That's more my point on your 3-year, 5-year projection, because people understand that you're not a magician. You can't magic yourself to the exact number that you promise you'll be at. People are fairly lenient, but you do need to get to a certain point, and they're investing on that basis. So it is hugely important to be roughly around where you want to be. And so it's that balance where the second round I could prove the concept, but it suddenly felt a bit more grown up, and this insane imposter syndrome that I've struggled with throughout all my businesses. And again, tends to be it's something that more women are afflicted with. I had to learn to manage. Oh my goodness, this is actually work. What hell? No one's caught me out yet. Why? I feel like I'm 28. I don't know what I'm doing. Help someone. I want a grown up to come and take over. But then we closed it and we did it, and we raised $500,000, and that was wonderful. And now we're just in the middle of finalizing the pitch deck before we go out, and it's going to be a £3 million raise, I think. So it's all getting a little more grown up, but each time you do it, you learn more about yourself and you learn more about your business. And actually, it's a wonderful opportunity to be challenged and have the answers, because it reminds me, again, it allows me time to reflect back in a way that you don't normally do when you're rushing around in your daily business. What are these numbers? Why are you different from other people? What's your scale plan? How are you going to sustain growth? And And these are great questions that help me understand and answer them myself. That's not the kind of things that you ask yourself on a daily basis. So I also use it as a really great opportunity to kind of challenge yourself and question your own stuff. And okay, can I do it? Am I going to deliver what I think I am?
And you come through it going, I didn't quite know I was going to do that, and we've done it. So I should be proud of myself, and actually taking that moment to go, I did that, and I should really recognize it.
And then also being okay with the fact that you didn't do some of the things that you thought you were going to do. That's the scary part. But, but actually, there's always a reason.
There's something to say, and I've learned this the hard way, is like, you're trying to do something that's never been done before. No one knows it exists as an option. So for us to not be a PR agency and teach people how to do their own PR, people are like, what? That's not a thing. And it's like, hang on a minute. We have to not only market the way we're working, but market ourselves and do our own PR, ironically. But it's that unshakable belief, as you said, of no, there is value in this. For me, it's getting client feedback. And when we get that validation from our paying clients to go, we're thrilled, we're delighted, taking a moment to share it in the team and actually look at it and go, this is real. And that imposter syndrome, or as someone else on the podcast talked about, the imposter experience, because it's not a diagnosed syndrome. So it's a thing that's apparently trying to help you along and support you, and it's trying to protect you.
God, what a positive outlook. I love I want to be friends with that person.
He's amazing. Well, he's ex-army, ex-consulting, and now he's a life coach and done training for our team. And it was amazing. He said your imposter experience is there because it's trying to stop you jumping off the cliff that you think you want to jump off. And actually, when you're a founder, you're like, no, the cliff jumping's happening. You can come along with me. It's really bloody scary, but you learn to fly. And it's a really cheesy analogy, but you do scary things. And then once you're past it and you're through it, you're like, oh my God, this is exhilarating. And I don't know about you, but you get slightly addicted to that feeling.
Totally.
And for you, going round upon round, and you're like, this is much bigger than just you now in such a short space of time. I imagine having that security in your numbers and knowing your numbers through and through and through gives you that confidence. Do you go back to running those spreadsheets and looking with your advisory CFO of looking at the business financially, just to give yourself that sort of breath?
Well, now I have the most wonderful, best hire I have lots of great hires. I have an incredible team. We're now at 20 people, but of a COO, this amazing woman who really helps with the scale and operations and is taking the business to where it needs to be, believes in my vision, has a huge amount of experience herself previously, and has been instrumental in helping with this business and helping us grow and scale and looking at the numbers and taking it to where we need to be, because it's so important. I'm just 31 next week. Cool. I've got 10, 11, 12 years of working experience, but I don't have the amazing experience she has. And I think it's really important as a founder to know your weakness and bring along some amazing partners along the way who are going to support you where you are weak and also believe in your vision.
Absolutely. And just going back to that investment piece, when you're presenting to investors, do they have the right to look at your full accounting history? How much information can they demand from you?
It's funny. I mean, they can really demand what they want. There's no rule book on that. So a lot of the time, there's always this great question as a founder is, do I take a salary or do I not? And how will the investors view that? And it got turned on its head for me actually in the second round, because for a long time I took nothing and took other work and all this kind of stuff. And actually it was someone that said to me, you're not a hero for not taking a salary. You're fundamental to the running of this business. And that means 100% time and focus on your side, on what you do. So actually from an investor's point of view, they want to see that you're paying yourself. Okay, let's not go crazy. I mean, it's not like I paid myself very fairly throughout the business, but I think it's okay to pay yourself a bit so the investors aren't going, well, if you're not focused on the business and you're trying to make money elsewhere, I'm not sure your time and attention is exactly where it should be. And actually really what they want to see from you is 100% dedication and commitment to what you're doing. So that's something that actually, since speaking with, I run a network, a WhatsApp group, because you're on it. Now I think 400 founders, but it started with kind of 30 and it's built over the last 5 years. But that was something very interesting, was that whole discussion when I've been speaking with some of those girls of salary and taking a salary and what would the investors think and all of that. But no, they can really ask what they want.
Don't be surprised at anything.
Yeah, but also it's okay to not take on an investor. I think we're all desperate for investors, but what we all really want is the right ones. And if you've got someone who's demanding non-stop this and that doesn't make you feel comfortable, or it feels like they're going to be on your back every second of every day and not allowing you to do what you need to do, and you think they might hamper that, it's okay to
say no. Yeah.
say no.
It's the same with clients. It's bad revenue. And actually, I said no to a few clients and I fired a client because you don't speak to my team like that. This is not giving us joy. Yeah. We're working really hard on your behalf. If this is bad, it's taking 5 times longer because of that personality. And walking away from it saves time and ultimately money in the long run. Looking to investors, it's not just the funding. They can give you support, mentorship, connections. They can open doors for you. They can do other things in that value added piece. But I was going to ask, what do you think are the biggest mistakes founders make when taking on investors, other than taking on the wrong ones? Is there anything you would go back and do again that you go, I wish I'd known? I always laugh, experience is what you get after you've needed it.
Yeah, I know. I think what I really struggled with beginning was trying to be perfect, trying to look seemingly perfect, be seemingly perfect. The business is your baby. And when you raise money and you open yourselves up to third parties who put money in, it feels like you're exposing your baby and kind of all the ugly things as well. And I think I used to be so fearful of anyone seeing the ugly side, because anyone who tells you their business is absolutely perfect is lying.
But it's hard when you're in a luxury space as well, because I'm Chanel trained. So I'm with you on that. Everything needs to be 150% perfect or we don't do it. That's not realistic when you're running a startup.
A, it's not realistic. B, it will kill you. And actually you'll be much less productive and much more stressed and a much more unhappy founder if you have that attitude. And I've learned to be okay with things not going right. And I always say to my girls at work, we're not doing brain surgery here. It's okay to make mistakes and we're going to learn from them.
Yeah.
And we embrace mistakes. We talk about them in our weekly meetings and what do we take and what do we learn and how do we move on? And FF&M has done a lot of amazing stuff on talking about how to fail and all this kind of thing. And it's definitely something that we're embracing. But it's something that I still sometimes struggle with, is being fearful of investors seeing, God, that sales weren't great that month, or someone left the business, or whatever it may be, the ugly side of things. And so my advice would be, don't be afraid about that and actually own up to that stuff. So when you're writing these investor updates, which I used to get so worked up about because I needed them to be absolutely perfect and I only wanted to say good news. Now I report failures. I report this didn't go right, but we've learned this from it. And I'd love your advice on it. They're there to support and guide you. Investors are great resources.
And that transparency, they respect you more.
But also they believe you, because someone sitting around talking nonstop about how great the business is doing. We're in a really great period where the business is doing really well. That's not to say things aren't always going right. And I think if you have that transparency with investors, she's human, brilliant, fantastic. We invested in a human being that makes mistakes and owns up to them and learns from them and grows from them. And anyone that, unless it's detrimental to the business, then maybe someone's going to have something to say about it. But people understand and they relate on a human level. It's okay to be perfect.
People like to help as well. And something I've learned purely by accident by doing this podcast of just putting my hand up for the first time in my life and going, I need some advice and I need some help. And people love helping. Investors tend to be older than you, a bit more experienced than you. They have money that they have earned in their careers from somewhere that they want to invest. They will know stuff. And if you're putting your hand up going, this wasn't perfect, this might be an issue, they'll be like, I can help with that. And they'll enjoy that.
And I think a lot of people forget they can do that. And that's something I've started doing much more in my investor updates is, hey, we're heading to New York on a trunk show. Like, I'd love you to send the invite around to anyone you think might want to come. I used to be kind of scared to ask those things, but these people, they want you to succeed. They want to help you. And actually, sometimes it just takes asking to get the great result. And actually, another thing that I would really advise is, I used to get very worked up about the pressure of having other people's money. And another great little nugget of advice that I've collected over the years is, these people are putting it in. And if they're investing in you, they're also understanding they might lose it. And that's how you roll the dice when you make an investment.
They've chosen to do it. And they wouldn't do it unless they had faith in it. But they are also getting something out of it potentially. So that's sort of, it's their choice. And don't waste your bandwidth and your energy on worry.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people do, myself included, or did. And I think it's hugely important to think, what a beautiful thing that someone's chosen to believe in my vision and give me this money. And I believe that I'm going to make them more money. Yeah. But it's also, I'm not going to let the stress of losing it affect my business performance and me and my mental health. And I'm going to do everything I can to double, triple, quadruple it. But things
don't
happen.
Take time away from your day job worrying, I think is the thing. Yeah. Well, I love that you've already talked about nuggets, because I always ask guests what's their golden nugget piece of advice. So you've covered that one. But something that we do with guests is, from a question from the previous guest, we ask for you, and then ask you to ask a question for the next guest. And they've all been very humble and heartfelt until Ed last week said, what cartoon character would best summarize you in how you run your business? Which I think is super sweet. And I was like, God, I'm Roadrunner and I'm this and I'm that. But his question for you was, what cartoon character would best summarize you and how you run your business?
What's hilarious is I was going to say Roadrunner.
I think that's any women in business. Is just like, go.
That is me in a nutshell. I mean, consistently, just never. I mean, on top of the fact that I have ADD and love to do a million things at once, I often feel like a roadrunner. I mean, literally nonstop. I'm the roadrunner.
No, but Roadrunner gets shit done. You like, there's dust trails and you are racing and you're gunning and you're going for it, which I think I'm quite proud of. What would your question be for our next guest? It could be anything around business or investment or anything that you found as a founder.
I think it's something that I have sitting at the top of my notes that I look at. I have this kind of section on my phone where I write something that someone says or something I want to remember, or a quote or something. And this is something I've always had pinned to the top, which is, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And I love that. And I think
I've got goosebumps.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be whoever your next guest is probably has an established business. It doesn't need to say you need to change career entirely. Just what is something right now? If you knew you couldn't fail in it, what would you do?
And there's no risk, there's no fear.
Nothing.
And we're talking about that worry of, I'm constantly whack-a-moling and your to-do list is never done. There's always something to come up to the top. I love that, because it makes you more fearless, doesn't it? It makes you go, actually, I'm just going to go for it.
But it's interesting if you give someone that as a question and really tell them that, imagine there's no repercussions, nothing, no sort of anything, what would you do?
I want to ask you that question back now, but I'm not allowed. I'm not allowed. It's for the next guest. Don't worry.
Well, I'd love to hear what the next guest says.
Yeah. Thank you, Daisy. That has been incredible, and huge congratulations. You've achieved so much so quickly, and from the outside looking in, it looks seamless and swan-like, but I know that you are pedaling quickly underneath to get things done, but you've done it with complete grace and professional,ism, so thank you so much. You are setting a great example for future female founders to come, so very appreciative.
Thank you, Julianne.
If you'd like to contact Daisy, you can find all of her details in the show notes, along with a recap of the advice that she has so kindly shared. Thank you for listening to How to Start Up. I hope these conversations offer you some confidence, encouragement, and reassurance that you're on the right track. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I'd be so appreciative if you were to rate, review, and subscribe, as it will really help other people starting a company discover it. Of course, if you've got any questions at all on PR communications or podcasting, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me, because at Fallowfield & Mason, we love supporting startups.